Hello and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Today we will talk about Richard Francis Cottingham, the Times Square killer, who committed 6 murders in New York and another 12 in New Jersey. Please subscribe. Let's begin today's case file. Richard Francis Cottingham was born on November 25, 1946, in the Mott Haven area of the Bronx, New York, as the eldest of 4 siblings. On the surface, his childhood looked no different from that of a typical American middle-class family. In 1948, his family moved to Dumont, New Jersey, and in 1956 they relocated again to Rivervale. During this time, a twisted desire had already begun to grow inside him. He would later confess that, as a boy living in Rivervale, he became intensely stimulated and fascinated by bondage pornography and sadistic sexual restraint. This fascination formed the psychological foundation of the brutal crimes he would eventually commit and fueled an abnormal development of dominance and cruelty toward others. At school, he did not appear to be a troublemaker. He graduated in 1964 from Pascack Valley High School in Hillsdale, New Jersey, and was active on both the cross-country and track teams. In his yearbook, he looked like an ordinary student who enjoyed sports, but the darkness inside him was slowly taking shape. After high school, he began working in the mailroom of Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, where his father served as a vice president. He later completed computer training courses and became an operator of mainframe computers, which were considered cutting-edge technology at the time. In October 1966, he moved to a position at Blue Cross Blue Shield and worked there as a computer operator for 14 years until his arrest in 1980. Interestingly, another man who would later be exposed as a serial killer, Rodney Alcala, worked in the same office under the alias John Berger. The two killers spent their daytime hours processing data in the same workplace without knowing each other's true identity. In May 1970, Cottingham married at Our Lady of Lord Church in Queens Village, and eventually became the father of 2 sons and 1 daughter. Every morning, he dressed in a suit and commuted to the Manhattan headquarters, appearing to neighbors as a devoted father and hard-working professional. But by the late 1960s, his double life had already begun crossing legal boundaries. On October 3, 1969, he was arrested in New York for drunk driving and fined $50. In 1972, he received a jail sentence for shoplifting from a department store. These minor offenses signaled that he was losing control over his impulses. More alarming warnings appeared in early arrest records involving sexual crimes. In 1973 and 1974, he was arrested twice on charges of robbery, sexual assault, and unlawful imprisonment of sex workers. However, the cases were dismissed because the victims feared retaliation and social stigma. Cottingham slipped through the legal system, and was free to plan even more serious crimes. By day, Cottingham used the money and knowledge gained from his job as a computer operator. By night, he became a predator roaming the dark backstreets of Times Square. In the basement of his home in Lodi, New Jersey, he created a locked room that even his wife was not allowed to enter, using it to act out his fantasies. By 1978, his marriage had deteriorated so badly that his wife filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse and neglect. Yet he continued to present himself publicly as a respectable family man. This careful mask made it difficult for police to identify him as a suspect in the string of murders occurring across the New York metropolitan area and cost investigators more than a decade. Hiding behind his social status and family life, he was fully prepared to begin his brutal hunt. As the mid-1970s approached, Cottingham's crimes moved beyond simple sexual assaults and robberies and entered a phase of extreme destruction and mutilation. He mainly chose motels around New Jersey and the Times Square area of New York as his hunting grounds. At the time, Times Square was a high-crime district filled with prostitution and drugs, and Cottingham looked there for victims who could satisfy his sadistic desires. He usually approached his victims as a polite customer, then mixed drugs into their drinks or forced them to take them so he could overpower them. Over time, his methods grew bolder, and the level of torture he inflicted rose to unimaginable levels. On December 15, 1977, he kidnapped Marianne Carr, a 26-year-old X-ray technician. He took her to the Quality Inn Hotel in Hasbrook Heights, handcuffed her, and brutally assaulted her. Cottingham sealed her mouth with tape to stop her from screaming, and repeatedly bit and cut her body in sadistic ways. In the end, she was strangled with a cord, and her body was dumped in a nearby parking lot the next morning. This crime was committed only a few hours after he finished work for the day, and showed the extreme duality of his life. The height of his madness came on December 2, 1979, at the Travelodge Motor Inn on 42nd Street in New York. Firefighters responding to a call discovered the bodies of two unidentified women in room 417. The condition of the bodies was horrific. Cottingham had removed the heads and hands of both victims with a sharp tool and set the remaining torsos on fire using gasoline. His actions combined careful planning meant to prevent identification. With a twisted pride that viewed his crimes as a kind of display. One of the victims was later identified as a 22-year-old woman of Iranian descent named killerTorso-mutilating, but the other remains known only as the Manhattan Jane Doe. Cottingham developed an obsession with keeping trophies from his victims, such as body parts, jewelry, and personal items, storing them in his secret space. On May 15, 1980, he murdered 25-year-old Marianne Jean Renner at the Seville Hotel. He mutilated her body, even cutting off her breasts and placing them near the head of the bed, creating a grotesque scene. These acts revealed that his goal went beyond killing. He wanted to completely destroy and possess his victims. Although he tried to burn some of the scenes to destroy evidence, investigators began to recognize his signature through the specific bindings and distinctive wounds left on the bodies. His hunting grounds stretched from the bright lights of New York to quiet roadsides in New Jersey. He kept handcuffs, ropes, and blunt weapons in the trunk of his car, so he would always be ready to strike. He especially enjoyed the terror his victims felt in their final moments, and often combined physical torture with cruel verbal abuse, telling them they had to endure it. The media gave the unknown murderer terrorizing the Times Square area the name Torso Killer, and people became afraid to walk the streets after dark. As if mocking the public fear, Cottingham continued killing even more frequently into the early months of 1980, adding new chapters to his brutal criminal history. The early morning hours of May 22, 1980, marked the turning point for the serial killer who had terrified New York and New Jersey for years. Cottingham picked up an 18-year-old sex worker named Leslie Ann Odell on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan, and drove her to room 117 at the Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. As soon as they entered the room, he revealed his true nature. Pretending he was going to give her a massage, he told her to lie face down. Then suddenly pulled out a sharp knife and held it to her throat. He handcuffed her wrists and began a sadistic session of torture. Terrifying her, he claimed that other women had endured the same thing, and that because she was a prostitute she deserved punishment. On the brink of death, Odell showed remarkable resourcefulness. She grabbed a fake gun he had left beside the bed, mistaking it for a real one, and tried to shoot him. Although it did not fire, the sudden move startled Cottingham. When he rushed toward her with the knife, Odell let out a piercing scream that echoed through the hotel. Staff members in the hallway heard it, realized something was terribly wrong, called the police, and began pounding on the door to room 117. What he thought was his private hunting ground instantly turned into a trap closing in on him, and Cottingham panicked and tried to escape. Racing into the corridor, Cottingham ran straight into responding officers. He attempted one last act of resistance by pointing the fake gun at them, but he was quickly subdued and handcuffed. Among the items found in his possession were a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a folding knife, and a large quantity of prescription drugs. These items proved he was not simply a violent offender, but a carefully prepared torturer and predator. Police soon searched his home in Lodi, New Jersey. In the basement, they discovered a secret room he had built beneath the same house he shared with his wife and children, filled with watches, jewelry, and identification cards belonging to missing or murdered women. During the trial, Cottingham flatly denied everything and insisted he was innocent. But not only did Odell testify, 2 other survivors, Susan Geiger and Karen Schild, took the stand. They described in vivid detail the drugs he forced on them, the cruelty of his torture, and the chilling things he said. Karen Schild especially outraged the jury when she revealed she had been kidnapped while pregnant, drugged, and abandoned. Investigators also secured physical evidence by lifting Cottingham's fingerprint from the ratchet mechanism of a pair of handcuffs found at the Valerie Street murder scene. Between 1981 and 1982, he faced multiple trials on dozens of charges including kidnapping, attempted murder, and aggravated sexual assault. In court, the image of an ordinary office worker disappeared. He showed a cold, expressionless demeanor. But the emotional testimony of victims, the trophies recovered from his basement, and scientific evidence made it clear there was no escape left for him. On October 12, 1982, a New Jersey court found him guilty, including for the murder of Marianne Carr, and sentenced him to multiple life terms amounting to hundreds of years. His bloody reign of terror had finally come to an end, though it would later become clear that what had been revealed was only part of the darkness he had been hiding. After being sentenced to life in prison in the early 1980s, Cottingham hid behind a wall of silence for more than 30 years. Inside prison, he either refused to speak at all or claimed he had been wrongly accused, shutting down investigators who tried to reach him. But in the 2000s, cracks began to appear when veteran detective Robert Anzilotti of the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office reopened dozens of unsolved cases from the 1960s and 1970s. Anzilotti believed that, based on the brutality and pattern of Cottingham's crimes, there had to be far more victims than the ones tied to his convictions. Anzilotti did not rush. Beginning in 2003, he visited Cottingham regularly, starting a long psychological battle. At times he showed respect, boosting Cottingham's ego. At other times, he flattered him by calling attention to his criminal cunning, gradually wearing down his defenses. After more than 10 years of persistence, Cottingham finally admitted in 2010 that he had killed Nancy Vogel in 1967. The truth had remained hidden for 43 years. Vogel, a mother of two, had been abducted from a shopping center and later found dead in a field in M.O.W. With that confession, more long-buried secrets began to surface. By the mid-2010s, Cottingham's admissions became even more detailed. He confessed to the murder of 13-year-old Jacqueline Harp, who disappeared and was later found in a wooded area in 1968. He also admitted to killing Irene Blase in 1969, who was found strangled with the cord from her own cross necklace, and 15-year-old Denise Velasca, who vanished while on her way to meet a friend that same year. These cases had remained unsolved for decades, because the victims were so young and the evidence so thin. Cottingham stunned investigators with his precise recollection of the victims' clothing and the features of the crime scenes. The most dramatic moments came in 2021 and 2022. Just as Detective Anzilotti was preparing to retire, Cottingham confessed that he was responsible for one of New Jersey's most notorious cold cases, the disappearance of Lorraine Kelly and Mary Ann Pryor in 1974. The two girls had disappeared while hitchhiking and were later discovered in the woods, lying side by side with their wrists and ankles bound. Cottingham revealed that he had lured them to a motel and drowned them in a bathtub. In 2022, modern DNA analysis conclusively linked him to the murder of Diane Cusick on Long Island in 1968. More than 50 years later, science finally shattered his lies. From his hospital bed, Cottingham shocked investigators again by suggesting he may have killed close to 100 women. He began recounting his so-called criminal history of perfect murders, admitting to cases such as Mary Beth Hines and Laverne Moy, whose bodies were thrown from a bridge near Rockville Center, and the murder of Sheila Hyman, who was brutally killed in her own home. For families who had lived for decades without answers, his confessions were both a form of overdue justice and a renewed source of grief. The relentless determination of Detective Anzilotti, combined with advances in forensic science, helped piece together the vast map of the Times Square killer's crimes, marking one of the most dramatic chapters in American criminal investigation history. On December 5, 2022, in a courtroom in Nassau County, New York, a trial marked the moment when a brutal saga of a serial killer that had stretched for half a century finally reached its legal conclusion. Richard Cottingham, a frail 76-year-old, already serving hundreds of years in a New Jersey prison, faced his crimes while lying in a hospital bed and appearing by video. He admitted guilt in 5 murders committed on Long Island between 1968 and 1973. The courtroom was filled with the families of the 5 victims, including the loved ones of Diane Cusick, and they poured out decades of anger and grief they had carried in silence. The court handed down yet another life sentence, ensuring once again that he would never leave prison alive. Behind the truth finally coming to light after so many years was the unwavering dedication of the victims' families. One figure stood out in particular: Jennifer Weiss, the daughter of Dita Goodhartze, who was brutally murdered near Times Square in 1979. Instead of remaining trapped in grief, she went directly to the prison and tried to meet Cottingham face to face. Weiss pushed into the killer's mind and played a key role in persuading him to reveal the truth about other unsolved murders. Through strange and unsettling conversations, she drew out the names of victims he had kept hidden for decades. Her efforts helped other families escape the torment of believing their loved ones had died under mysterious and unresolved circumstances. Cottingham's case remains one of the longest and most horrific records of serial murder in American legal history. Even the victims he officially acknowledged in 2021 and 2022 far exceed the number from his original convictions. Investigators are still pursuing his claim that there may have been as many as 100 victims. For cases where he confessed but could not be prosecuted, authorities chose to document the truth through non-prosecution agreements. This decision placed the wishes of grieving families ahead of further punishment, allowing them to finally learn what happened to the people who disappeared. Through this process, names that had been fading from memory, such as Lisa Thomas, murdered in 1974, were spoken again, and long cold files were finally closed. Today, Cottingham lies in the medical ward of the state prison in Trenton, New Jersey, effectively waiting for the end of his life. Once a predator who spread fear across Times Square, he is now a frail old man, dependent on an oxygen machine, facing the judgment of the law. Society looks back on his crimes and confronts both the dual nature of a serial killer and the shortcomings of the past, using the lessons to build stronger systems for preventing future crimes. Rapid advances in DNA technology have also sent a stark warning to criminals everywhere. No matter how long it takes, there is no such thing as a perfect murder. The story of Richard Cottingham does not end simply with the downfall of a murderer. It is also a record of victory, built by detectives who refuse to give up and by a daughter, courageous enough to face her mother's killer in hope of helping others. At last, the families of the victims can stand at their loved ones' graves and say that the true culprit has been found, bringing their long mourning to a close. Although the lives taken can never be restored, the effort to bring truth out of the darkness became a small flame of healing for the wounds left behind by crime. The demon of Times Square will slowly fade inside prison walls, but the lessons learned and the memory of the victims will be remembered forever. That is all for today's story. Please subscribe and hit like. We will be back tomorrow with another crime and mystery. Thank you for watching.